Hi, I'm Peter Thomas Senese, and I am here today to discuss a very serious loophole in the fight to prevent international parental child abduction and human trafficking of minors from occurring. Since beginning our work together on child abduction prevention, Carol Ann Velk and I have remained very actively involved in advocacy and education in this area. Recently, our research has led us to uncover significant border control security vulnerabilities that we believe are being currently utilized in illegally transporting children across U.S. borders in both incoming and outgoing parental abduction cases, as well as being capitalized by smugglers who trade in human life. It is our hope that our findings will cause both short and long-term preventive steps and solutions to be taken at all necessary levels so that we may work together to further protect our nation's children. To put it mildly, we have a serious, growing, and immeasurable problem on our hands, and its far-reaching tentacles are lashing out at society's greatest resource, our children. Our initial research evolved around the question, how are children illegally abducted into and out of the United States and our adjacent neighboring countries, despite preventive measures that may be in place by either court order or by preventive laws and programs? The answer to this question vary. However, our study led us to focus on the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, known as WHTI, which is the focus of the extensive report that Carolyn and I recently published and is titled International Parental Child Abduction and Human Trafficking in the Western Hemisphere. We believe that the international travel document requirements established under the WHTI program for minors aged 16 or younger who are traveling abroad in the Western Hemisphere, that is, from the United States, Canada, Mexico, or the Caribbean, by either land or by sea, may facilitate the ability of an adult's intent to illegally remove a child from one country's borders to another. Specifically, a child under the age of 16 and who is traveling by land from the United States to Canada or Mexico does not need to present a passport to enter a bordering country. What is required is a copy of an original birth certificate. I know what I just said. A copy, not an original, but a copy of a birth certificate. This is surely absurd in lieu of the growing rate of international child abduction and child slavery. Putting this into perspective, a parent living in the United States can realistically travel across the U.S.-Mexican border with their young child or children with relatively limited concern for being stopped so long as they present a photocopy of the child's birth certificate. And as most of you know, it is only through passport records that Immigration and Border Patrol agents may know if there is an abduction risk at hand. The presentation of a child's birth certificate will not inform a border agent of any abduction risk. To put it mildly, the present WHTI loophole that allows a child to travel from one country to another without presenting a passport enables child abductors and human traffickers to continue to commit these serious and growing crimes against children. In fact, what is equally as concerning is the fact that if a child is traveling by sea, let's say on a cruise ship that originates and returns to the same port of call, but disembarks in a port of another country, a child under the age of 16 does not need a passport when traveling abroad. All that is needed is a photocopy of a birth certificate under the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. Now, if an abducting adult has an intent to abduct or traffic a child into or out of another country, one of the easiest ways to do so is by a cruise ship, as many of the port of calls do not require for a child embarking to present their passport. Most concerning, our extensive investigations indicate that cruise ships do not have any real-time reporting systems in place that will prevent a child from deporting to another country by sea if, in fact, there is a warrant or a notice or a court order in place that prevents the child from traveling abroad. What the WHTI has created is a substantial set of loopholes that we believe are allowing hundreds, if not thousands, of children to be criminally smuggled or abducted each year from our adjoining border to another. The in-depth International Parental Child Abduction and Human Trafficking in the Western Hemisphere report that Carol Ann and I have published provides a substantial and accurate set of information on all of these issues. Under the Intelligence, Reform, and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative was designed to strengthen border security and is a joint Department of Homeland Security and Department of State plan that is carried out in part by the U.S. Customs Border Protection Agency. The intent of the initiative is to further protect and strengthen our nation's borders by requiring all travelers to and from Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean and Bermuda to present a WHTI compliant document that establishes identity and citizenship. During the course of our investigation, it became apparent that there is limited available research or data concerning the international parental child abduction or human trafficking as it relates to travel document requirements for children crossing into contiguous countries by land or by sea under WHTI policy. However, what is certain is that child abduction and human trafficking to our bordering nations of Mexico and Canada represent a great number of reported international abductions and missing person cases originating from the United States. Additionally, we believe that a vast majority of unreported child abduction cases are associated with Mexico and Canada. Our findings are cause for grave concern. It is clear that due to the varying travel documentation requirements for land and sea travel, that there exist substantial loopholes in the U.S. law that allow would-be abductors or traffickers to capitalize on the porous travel documentation requirements required for children under WHTI. Today, very serious security gaps exist directly related to WHTI, especially as it pertains to a child's travel documentation requirements. These stunning flaws and loopholes provide substantial opportunity for illegal cross-border family or stranger child abductions and human trafficking to occur to and from the United States. Statistics from the two most current annual reports that are dated April 2009 and April 2010 demonstrate abduction crimes against children in the United States and abroad are substantially on the rise. Assistant Secretary of State for Consular Affairs Janice Jacobs reports that during fiscal year 2009, the Office of Children's Issues experienced a significant increase in the number of reported international parental child abduction kidnappings. The 2010 report indicates that we can anticipate the current trends previously seen with respect to the increase in international parental child abduction to continue. In fact, the number of international parental child abduction cases in which a Hague application has been filed has nearly doubled since fiscal year 2006, from 564 cases to 1,135 reported cases in 2009. Now, the 2009 report utilized data that was collected during the period of October 1st, 2007 through September 30th, 2008, and is referred to as fiscal year 2008. This report reflects that 1,082 new cases were filed involving 1,615 children. During the study year, the U.S. was successful in returning only 361 children. The 2010 report covers the time period from October 1st, 2008 through September 30th, 2009 that is referred to as fiscal year 2009. During fiscal year 2009, 1,135 new applications were received for assistance in an attempt to facilitate the return of 1,621 children who were wrongfully removed from the United States. Sadly, during fiscal year 2009, the U.S. was successful in the return of 436 children. The report does not indicate during which fiscal year a returned child was actually abducted. Now consider if an international child abduction growth rate continues at an average of 20% per year for the next 10 years. This means that the projected number of reported U.S. child citizens that will be internationally abducted in the year 2020 would reach levels of over 9,500 children for that year alone. To put this into perspective, this loss would be the equivalent of 241 school buses carrying 40 children each suddenly disappearing. Additionally, if we add the total number of reported international child abductions that have taken place from 2007 and add the forecasted number of abductions and anticipated to occur using a 20% growth rate, then a total of over 53,000 children will have been reported as internationally abducted from 2007 through 2020. To put this into perspective, this would be the equivalent of an entire Major League Baseball stadium filled with children simply disappearing. The Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative requirements for air travel took effect on January 23, 2007, and requires all travelers, regardless of age, to present a valid passport or Nexus card if they are traveling by airplane. However, travel by sea or land till this day does not require a child under the age of 16 to travel with a valid passport. Additionally, the U.S. increased the security of its child citizens when on February 1, 2008, new requirements under Public Law 106-113, Section 236 took effect, requiring the permission of both parents prior to the issuance of a U.S. passport for children under the age of 16. According to the Department of State's Office of Children's Issues, U.S. law requires the signature of both parents or the child's legal guardians prior to the issuance of a U.S. passport to children under the age of 16 years old. Due to the implementation of these new requirements, the ability to unlawfully transport children that do not possess dual citizenship across borders has become increasingly difficult. The two-parent signature requirement necessary for a U.S. passport to be issued for a child has greatly reduced the opportunity that a passport will be issued without another parent's knowledge or consent. Unfortunately, documentation fraud is still very difficult to detect and remains a severe threat to our nation's children, especially if initiated by parental forgery. Tragically, for many targeted parent victims of international parental child abduction, this type of fraud is common. Unquestionably, it is critical that precautionary steps continue to be taken before issuing passports to children due to substantial evidence of documentation fraud. Additionally, and to our great concern, it appears to be relatively easy to obtain fraudulent or falsified identification or residency documentation. In response to the rise of illegal entry and exodus to the U.S., the implementation of WHTI policy has effectively narrowed this type of documents that are acceptable in providing identity and citizenship. Although this change is a critical step toward meeting the challenges of securing our nation's borders, there still remain significant security challenges due to certain allowable exemptions. Unfortunately, when it comes to cross-border travel and children being transported by land or sea, numerous security defects exist. Unquestionably, individuals or organizations with intent to breach the law have exploited these policy flaws. Our nation's children, as well as children from other countries, are suffering either as defenseless victims of international parental child abduction or as helpless slaves taken into the world of human trafficking, where the worst types of crimes against humanity are the norm. We invite you to learn more about the substantial loopholes created under the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. We urge all individuals responsible for overseeing the welfare of children, particularly in high-risk abduction cases, to be mindful that under present policy, a child can be abducted by one parent across our nation's borders by land or by sea with relative ease. We also urge all immigration, customs, and border agents to be mindful that fraudulent documentation used for a child's border crossing is rampant, and to steer on the side of great caution when a child is traveling internationally. In the near future, we anticipate that federal legislation will be announced that will modify documentation travel requirements for children under age 16 who are traveling abroad by land or by sea under the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. We ask that you support this legislation in the name of children everywhere. My name is Peter Thomas Senese, the author of Chasing the Cyclone, and a loving father who once had to race into the darkest of storms of international parental child abduction. I personally invite you to learn more about international child abduction and human trafficking as it is related to the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative by visiting either chasingthecyclone.com or my personal website, peterthomassenese.com. I thank you for taking the time to review this video. I hope you have a great day. Thanks.